Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the Recovery Plug. What's happening, man? I hope you guys are doing great today. I know that my day is going just fine. Well, check this out, man. If you would please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer for the addict who still suffers, and for those of us who are still bound down to some sort of struggle that keeps us from moving forward in our daily lives in this toxic world that we live in. Yeah, so if you would please join me in a moment of silence. God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. All right. Well, now that we got that squared away, check this out, man. Today, what I wanted to do for today's episode is just dive into a daily meditation, man. And I'm going to read off the daily meditation and then we'll elaborate on that and see where it goes from there and see what kind of message we get out of it today. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that this message today is helpful for someone out there. And because that's the whole purpose, right, of doing this podcast is to help, to help, that person struggling. And if that's and to help the person struggling and to help the person that's already in a recovery mode, that we can, give them a little bit of an encouragement to keep moving forward. You know what I mean? Because I know that recovery can get stagnant. It can get boring. You know what I mean? So to always have a little nudge and to have, to let people know that there's people out there who care, right? And who hope that and who pray that you guys, keep moving forward and doing great. So at any rate, let me go ahead and drop into this reading, and then we'll move on from there. So let me pull this thing up right quick here, and I will start with the reading. Let me see. But first, we can't read anything without these things here, right? So let me switch these off real quick and get these reading things on here. And it goes like this. It says, we want and demand that things always go our way. We should know from our past experience that our way of doing things did not work. And this comes from the next part here. It comes, it's a part of the basic text from the Narcotics Anonymous book. And what it states is, all of us have ideas, plans, goals for our lives. There's nothing in the NA program or any 12-step program for that matter that says we shouldn't think for ourselves, take initiative, and put responsible plans into action. It's when our lives are driven by self-will that we run into problems. When we are living willfully, we go beyond thinking for ourselves, right? We think only of ourselves. We forget that we are part of a world and that whatever personal strengths we have is drawn from a higher power. We might even go as far as to imagine that other people exist solely to do our bidding. And quickly we find ourselves at odds with everyone and everything around us. At this point, we have two choices. We can continue in our slavery to self-will, making our unreasonable demands and becoming frustrated because that planet doesn't spin our way. Or we can surrender, relax, knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out, and find our way back to a condition of peace with the world, thinking, taking initiative, making responsible plans. There's nothing wrong with these things, so long as they serve God's will, not merely our own. Just for today, I will plan to do God's will, not mine. If I find myself at odds with everything around me, I will surrender self-will. And that's it. That's the reading of today, man. And check this out. Gosh, to be honest with you, surrendering self-will, that's a very hard thing to do, especially when you're bound down to some sort of adversity, to some sort of an addiction, if you will. I know my own personal journey, being bound down to a drug addiction or to alcoholism or to the PTSDs or to childhood traumatic experiences, to depression, to suicidal thoughts, whatever it was at whatever point in my life, surrendering self-will was, gosh, I'm going to say probably hardly ever. In this toxic world that we live in, my self-will was, gosh, it was either my way or the highway. I got control of my life. I got this, and ain't nobody going to tell me different. That's how I've lived my life for many, many years. And sure, life is a life of cycles, right? It's a life of up and downs. It's a life of coming and going. It's a life of life and death, right? In many different ways, shapes, and forms. But to think that that your life is gonna be where it's supposed to by your self-will, by just what you want to do, is, gosh, it is just such a facade in a thought process that it's a big blinding part of living in today's world, especially with the toxicity that we have. You know what I mean? Our life in today's world is much different than it was in ancient times, obviously. Much different today than when I was growing up as a kid. When I was growing up as a kid, there was no internet. There was not even any cell phones, you know what I mean? So cell phones didn't exist. And so if I needed to and wanted to interact with anything and everything, I had to physically get my body up and go do it. You know what I mean? Whether compared to now, I don't have to get up at all. All I got to do is pull out a device and interact with my world. You know what I mean? Which is really that fine line of distortion, right? It's a fine line of your distorted life, because it tells you, or it's almost like you have to do whatever it is that the world is putting out there. And when I say that, I mean that the internet, social media, all of that kind of stuff has a big influence on how you live your life. You know what I mean? It has a big influence on what people find funny, what people find not funny, what people find that this is the way, this is not the way, this is in, this is not in. You know what I mean? Dress like this or don't dress like this, because you'll be made fun of. If you look like this, you're going to be made fun of because there's TikToks about it, or what is that other thing called? Gosh, I forgot the other one. It's TikTok and so Instagram. You know what I mean? You're either Instagramming this person or whatever, and now people are gonna find that funny, and other people will find it hurtful, and just so it has a lot to do with how you dictate your life. So you don't. Surrendering self-will in a world of today is like, man, everybody's got their guard up. You know what I mean? Everybody got their guard up. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Nobody wants to be pushed around. Nobody, everybody is living, behind the mask in a sense. You know what I'm saying? And what we're doing is we're reverting away from what we should be focusing in, and that is focusing on living the life of right now, living the life of you, living the life of within. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, let me read you something real quick. Just something that's in this book that I'm reading, and it's kind of cool the way they put this in turn. And it says here that, and this is from the book of Beyond Belief, The Secret Gospel of Thomas by Elaine Pagels. It's this book right here. And there's a part in this book, and I'm just going to go ahead and read like two paragraphs of it, just so we can kind of see what they're talking about. And it says, the events sketched here obviously affect the way we understand our culture, our history. But for those of us who find ourselves implicated in this history, as I do, untangling some of its complex strands has practical consequences as well as intellectual ones. In my own case, the hardest thing about and the most exciting thing about research into Christian beginnings has been to unlearn what I thought I knew and to shed presuppositions I had taken for granted. The research offers new ways to relate to religious tradition. Orthodox doctrines of God, Jewish, Christian, or Muslim tend to emphasize that separation between what is divine and what is human. In other words, of the scholar of religious, of religion, Rudolf Otto says, God is holy other than humankind. And I'll just leave it there. And to me, that is like, it's saying that these different religions, these different sects are believing in that God is not of humankind, that God is of another being, another energy, another light, another universe, whatever, right? You can put into that blank right there. And I think what so many of us tend to do in today's world is finding it hard to surrender your self-will because we're so, attached to a world of smell, hear, touch, feel, and grabbing and attachment and that sort of thing, that to believe in a divine presence, to believe in a divine, whatever it is you want to call it, you can call it God, you can call it divine energy, you can call it the divine light, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it. But to live in something of that nature is so hard to surrender self-will because it's something that we don't know if it exists. We don't see it, we don't feel it, we don't touch it. You know what I mean? And I think that is the fine line that makes it, that makes life distorted. That makes it hard for addicts like you and I, whoever's an addict out there, you know what I mean? Or whoever's dealing with an adversity, just being a human being, right? Because we have adversities, we have suffering all the time. Nobody in this world is immune to that. And how you live your life according to that suffering is, I believe, that fine line of distortion. I believe that fine line of distortion is where you figure out how to surrender the self-will, to allow yourself to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to give this up to that energy. I'm going to give this up to whatever it is that in my mind I believe it is. And, go back to like the Buddha and Jesus and figures like that in a spiritual sense they always say that it's within you. That energy is within you. That power is within you. And I believe that is where it's so hard for us to surrender that self-will to that. You know what I mean? And I for me personally, it was a hard thing to do. And it took many, many years of practice and many, readings and research and teaching and just learning about a bunch of different religions and a bunch of different, scientific experiments that had to do with connecting the old ancient wisdom to present day. You know what I mean? And it's now, we're in this world now that they're finally connecting the dots. You know what I mean? And to me, that's extraordinary to me. I find that really really cool because it's something that I've dealt with since I was a little kid. You know what I mean? I've had this ability as a always to feel things, to hear things, to know when there was good energy and bad energy in the room. If that makes any sense to anybody, I've always had this ability, and I was always afraid of it. I didn't know what it was until I got older and started doing a lot of research and reading about stuff like that. I always thought that it was this black cloud that was always around me, and go figure, that black cloud wasn't a scary thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't until I started practicing spirituality in a sense of connecting to the energy of my inner self, to the energies of what I call the divine matrix and Mother Earth, the connection to everything, to every sentient being that's out there, to every energy that I feel in my meditation process that I do, that I feel connected to a lot of things. You know what I mean? And it's in that silent energy and that silent, practice that I do is where I feel the surrender of self-will. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I started practicing and studying that way that for some odd reason, I felt that the chains had lifted off me from from the things that I was dealing with, from the addiction to the mental thought process of dealing with the childhood trauma and the PTSDs and that sort of thing. It all felt like in the moments that I when I practice my meditation, it feels like I'm looking at it in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Like it's no longer part of me, but I could see it down here, and it's kind of a weird analogy, but that's how it feels to me, and when I come back from my adventure in my meditation process, because my meditation process sometimes they last up to 2-3 hours. You know what I mean? Just in silence, I'm just meditating for hours, and in that, when I come back to, I know that I still have all the suffering. I understand that I still have all the suffering. I understand that I have an addiction. I understand that I have PTSD. I understand that I'm dealing with childhood trauma, depression, anxiety, suicide. I understand that I have all of those things that I'm dealing with, but they're like dormant things that are just floating around me. You know what I mean? They're not in here anymore, but they're still attached to me, if that makes any sense. And so I don't feel that monkey on my back, if you will. I don't feel that heavy weight, man, of just, dealing with sorrow and suffering and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? And now I deal with suffering, but I deal with it in a totally different way, because as I'm dealing with it, I'm surrendering self-will. And when I surrender self-will, I no longer am in control of the suffering. That's to me, the cool thing about it, is that in that moment, when I'm in my meditation, I no longer have control of that. I have some help. I don't know where it's coming from because I don't see it, but I feel it. I feel it in my heart and my soul, and I feel it in the vibration of my body. You know what I mean? And it just feels, I don't know, it's an amazing feeling to me, and to know that I don't have to do this on my own, that I'm not in this corner by myself like I used to feel. I used to feel that I'm living my life with all these things that are trapped in my head, and the only way I know how to get rid of them is by smoking some dope. You know what I mean? And all the meanwhile, it never goes away. It's still there, and it's even harder and heavier once the dope wore off. You know what I mean? And but nonetheless, I'm just grateful that I found a way. And when I say that, I mean that I finally channeled in and tuned in my personal frequency of my power, because you and I have this power. You know what I mean? Make no mistake about that. And this is something that's scientifically proven now. This is something that the folks in ancient times were dealing with, this power, and they knew they had it. And how cool is that, that you have this power that is able to, change things in a sense. Because when you know that you have this power, now you know that your mind is malleable. You know what I mean? When your mind is malleable, dude, that right there, because your mind is malleable now, when you surrender self-will, your mind is malleable now. Now your mind can be formed, shaped, and put in whatever direction that you want it to go. How cool is that? You know what I mean? I personally think that that's really a cool thing. You know what I mean? And everybody from back in the ancient days, like Jesus and Buddha, they both said that power is coming from within. You know what I mean? And a lot of people seem to kind of forget that part. You know what I mean? They kind of just forget that part and just go through all these other textual, phases. Okay, you need to do this, and that to obtain whatever. You know what I'm saying? And they really seem to like just kind of shim over the top of that thing that is there, that's telling you, hey, you know what? The power, you have that power. You know what I mean? Your life doesn't have to be as complicated as you are portraying it and seeing it in your mind, because your mind is malleable, that power is able to change you. That power is able to redirect your life where it needs to go. You know what I mean? That to me is just amazing. And how you want to define that power, that is up in the air as far as I'm concerned. And that's just my own personal opinion, because I don't believe that if you don't do something, that you can't tap into this power. That wasn't a very good analogy, but in other words, I don't believe that just one thing is going to be able to get you tapped into that. Let's just say that. You know what I mean? And for me, personally, man, it wasn't until I started living a spiritual life, when I started living a spiritual life and incorporating these spiritual practices, and not only practicing and reading one thing, I started practicing and reading a lot of things. You know what I mean? I wanted to understand where all of these concepts came from. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, if for those of you who are Christians, if you really rewinded way back to the days of how these books were written and that sort of thing, you'll be amazed at the things that people have done throughout history. It wasn't a pretty sight. You know what I mean? If you had just landed there in time at that one particular time when this stuff was happening, you would have considered this barbaric, scary, maybe even evil. You know what I mean? Because when some people practiced certain things, they were getting burned to death in front of the whole crowd or whatever. You know what I mean? That's how torturous it was. And then for one day for somebody just to say, hey, you know what? We're going to put into law that Christianity is the way you got to live. And this is set in stone. It's a law now. You know what I mean? To me, that's kind of weird in a sense. You know what I mean? That they had to go to this extreme to make it a law. And if you don't practice this and you're practicing other things, then you're considered a heretic, an occult, or a systematic type of way of living or teaching or whatever, and you were an outcast. You know what I mean? So I find a lot of things helpful in a lot of different way people practice. Let's just say that. And that's just part of the spiritual journey. Because my journey is the connection with the divine presence of Mother Earth, the divine matrix in the universe, wherever, whatever you want to call that. And that lifted the chains of my suffering. That lifted the chains of me dealing with my suffering in a certain way. Instead of being bound down to this depression, to these suicidal thoughts, to these, addictive behaviors, it allowed me to be one and the same with myself, with the universe, with everything around me. And that practice came from a lot of meditation, you know what I mean? A lot of meditation, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, and doing this on a consistent basis. This is not something that I do just one day out of the week. This is every single day. And I do this. This is the reason I do this, because when I was in the world of addiction, if I consumed that much energy of my self-being to do these bad things, why wouldn't I use that same energy to do something good? You know what I mean? It would just be, I would be doing myself a disservice, and I would be, in a sense, I wouldn't be in it with 2 feet, you know what I mean? I'd be in 1 foot and 1 out. Half measures don't avail to nothing, as far as I'm concerned. So I need to go in it all the way, and that's what I'm doing. And by doing that, that means I have to practice and reading a bunch of different books, different, religious beliefs, and seeing how all of the things, and it's amazing to me, because the more that I do that, the more the dots start connecting. You know what I'm saying? But they start connecting in a good way, though, you know what I mean? In a way that goes all the way back to the power of within, the power of that divine matrix, of that divine power of humanity, or whatever you want to call it, is connected with the energies of the earth to the universe and back. And I find that powerful. I find that powerful, that I personally have this frequency that I'm tuned in, because everybody has their own frequency. And if your frequency is tuned in with that, then man, the ability for you to do things, it gets, there's clarity in that, and it just makes it that much more potent, I feel, you know what I mean? And but nonetheless, that's why I do the videos, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I need to share the things that I've gone through, the things that have helped me, because somebody else's story was that for me. You know what I mean? Somebody else's story, somebody else's experience was that for me. And I feel that it wouldn't be right if I wasn't giving away what has helped me along the way. You know what I mean? So yeah. But anyway, I guess man, I guess that's going to be it for today, man. That's today's episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that somebody out there got some good insight and something helpful to keep you moving forward in your journey, to maybe help you take that first step today. So anyway, I guess if you would please at this time give me a thumbs up, shoot me a comment, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. Just know that when you do hit that subscribe button, it don't cost you a thing, man. And it does help another veteran. It has helped somebody else with PTSDs, childhood traumatic experiences, drug addiction, alcoholism, depression, suicidal thoughts, just being angry, sadness, all those types of things, my friends, because I have dealt with all those things at one point in time in my life. And guess what, man? I know a way out. And my way out just might be your way out. So Thank you for listening, man. I really appreciate it. I guess until the next time on When the Smoke Clears, I am the Recovery Plug.